Let's talk about the research around sleep training. This is such a highly controversial topic, and trust me, I know, I work in this field. I know how controversial it can be, but there is a lot of misuse of research and misunderstanding of research, and I want to kind of clear the air a little bit, have all of this research, talk through it in this video. So, 2 quick disclaimers. First, yes, I am a certified pediatric sleep consultant. I help families sleep train, but I do not believe that every family needs to sleep train. Every family is different. They have different goals, different priorities, different situations. And so I'm never going to say, you will never hear me say that you need to sleep train, okay? That is a totally personal decision, and it's not the right decision for every family. Second quick disclaimer I want to say, we have a lot of good, solid research on sleep training as it stands. We can always use more and better research though. Absolutely, I will agree to that 100%. But the good, solid research that we do have paints a very positive picture about sleep training. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And at the end, I will also go over some of the things that are used against sleep training in the research, but you'll find out aren't actually applicable, or they don't actually say what people think they say. We'll get to that at the end though. As we go through this video, I have linked every bit of research below in the description. So I would encourage you to not just take my word for it, but to go through and read through some of the studies and look and see for yourself what they say about sleep training. First things first, is sleep training even effective? Does it work? No doubt that is a very important question if we're considering sleep training, because if it doesn't work, if it's not helpful, why would we even bother? The answer is yes, sleep training is effective. I mentioned earlier that there is a ton of sleep training research out there, and there was actually a review done of 52 different sleep training studies. So they reviewed all of them. The woman who reviewed them all, her name was Jody Mendel, and she is a psychologist. She went through all of them and kind of piece together all of the findings from them. This was published in the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And what they found was that 94% of participants across these studies reported positive outcomes from sleep training, that their sleep issues improved as a result of the behavioral modifications that were done through sleep training. The overall conclusion when looking at the effectiveness from these studies is that there is strong empirical evidence that sleep training does help, that it is effective, that these behavioral modifications, these behavioral interventions are helpful in easing bedtime problems and night waking. So we've seen sleep training be effective. Now, what are the benefits to the child when it comes to sleep training? Besides the obvious that getting better sleep will help us feel better and do better, that one is almost a no-brainer. But I want to look at, there was a review of 13 different studies that looked at daytime behavior, daytime mood when a child was sleep trained versus when they weren't sleep trained. And again, the data we find here presents a really great picture. So before sleep training versus after sleep training. After these children were sleep training, they presented as being more secure, more predictable, less fussy, less crying, and less irritable during the daytime. So that was after sleep training. They looked that way. They had all of these kind of better daytime attitudes and moods and behaviors. So that's a really great picture. Shows us that children do benefit during the day from having better sleep at night. Again, kind of a no-brainer, but the research is there to back that up. Okay, so we've discussed how sleep training is effective. It does work. We've also seen how the child benefits from sleep training. But what about parents? Are there parental benefits? I'll give you a spoiler. Yes, there are absolutely parental benefits. In fact, I would say that that's something that probably everyone can agree on, right? A lot of times people who are against sleep training will say, oh, well, you're just being selfish. We know that parents are going to benefit from sleep training, but let's look at what the research says as well, because I think it's really important. This large-scale review that Jody Mendel did, looking at these 52 studies, within those 52 studies, as she reviewed them, there were 12 specifically that looked at parental benefits. And so that is the data she pulled out to see what the parental benefits are of sleep training interventions. Now, across these 12 studies, they found remarkably consistent results across all of these studies. And I actually have a cheat sheet here of all the benefits they found because I didn't want to do disservice and I couldn't memorize these. So let me tell you what they found. The parents after sleep training exhibited rapid and dramatic improvements in their mental health status. They had fewer symptoms of depression, an increased sense of parenting efficacy, an enhanced marital satisfaction, and reduced parenting stress. So these are huge benefits to the parents. And I don't just want to stop there, because while those benefits, improvements to parents, to their mental health, that's super great for the parents. You know who that is also really great for? The children. If we know anything about attachment and forming a secure attachment, parental mental health is so key to having a healthy attachment with our child. So if our mental health is suffering, it is going to affect our ability for us and our child to have that secure attachment. So while this list is really, really great for parents, and I'm so happy that sleep training has this positive effect on parents, it is just as great to kids. This trickles down into our children's lives. And so if you are struggling with sleep, I want to encourage you, yes, it's effective. Yes, it is helpful for your kids and has benefits. And yes, it is helpful for you and has benefits. And the benefits to the parent are significantly linked to the benefits of the child. All right, so I've harped on the benefits enough, I think. What about the things our critics are saying? All right, so there is a very strong critique of sleep training that, sure, maybe it has some short-term benefits, but in the long term, is it harming our children? And I want to tell you that the research we have tells us that no, it is not harmful to children. So there is one main big study that was done. It was a randomized controlled trial, which is kind of our gold standard for determining causal relationships. So this is really important when looking at sleep training and whether it has long-term negative impacts. All right. And so this was a study done in Australia, several different researchers on this study. And if you look at the links below, it's the one Hiscock and Price. Those are two of the main researchers. And what they did was they had a control group that did not sleep train, and they had a group that did sleep train. And not only did they do the initial sleep training and take measurements and results and information at that time, but they also followed up 1 year later and 5 years later. So there was a long-term follow-up aspect to this study. And again, I'm going to read for you what they found because I want to make sure I do it justice. I don't want to miss anything. So I'm reading this quick summary about what they found. This is also from Emily Oster's book, Crib Sheet, which is a great parenting book that gives you all of the research and facts that's out there and kind of helps compile it for you. So this is what the researchers of that study found. They found no differences in any outcomes, including emotional stability and conduct behavior, stress, parent-child closeness, conflict, parent-child attachment, or attachment in general. Basically, their conclusion was the kids who were sleep trained looked exactly like those who were not. So there are no long-term negative impacts that have been studied, that have been found. There is no evidence that harm is out there. So as far as this claim that there is harm, the studies that we do have show no harm, no evidence for harm. Now, let's talk briefly about some studies that you may hear critics of sleep training cite, okay? So a lot of times sleep training and putting your child down awake and stepping away, stepping out of the room, whatever, basically not helping them to sleep, that is often equated to some of the abuse and neglect that we saw in orphanages. For example, in Romanian orphanages, where kids were left in their cots, in their cribs, pretty much 24/7 because there were so many children there and there weren't enough hands to help. And these kids absolutely had significant negative impacts. There were long-term effects of this neglect. Now, while that is used as a critique of sleep training, I would say that is far cry from what sleep training actually is, right? Because with sleep training, we're still being responsive. We're just responding in a different way. And it doesn't have to mean that you shut the door and don't see your child for 12 hours at night. And also, you are with your child all day during the day, responding to and caring for their needs. So your child is having their needs met. Sleep training is not about not meeting your child's needs. It is about teaching them a new way to fall asleep. So that is one thing you will hear. And another critique I will hear is just that it's too much stress on the child. It's too stressful, and stress is so bad, right? Cortisol, stress, bad, bad, bad. No, not exactly. Cortisol and stress are part of our everyday lives. Cortisol is a very important hormone in our body that regulates our sleep and wake cycle, and that helps us deal with stressful situations. And so to just right away say that stress or cortisol are bad, that is wrong. That is a fallacy. What I would encourage you to say is to look at positive stress and toxic stress. There are these two different buckets for stress. And I would argue, and so do researchers, that sleep training falls under this positive stress bucket. Okay, so that would be things like moving to a new home or starting a daycare. Sleep training, yes, these are absolutely stressful things, but that does not mean that they are toxic. And in fact, they are very different from the toxic stress that is over here, like abuse and neglect. Last thing I want to say that you may see cited against sleep training is what is called the middle miss cortisol study. And I will also link that below so you can check it out. It was a study done with, I believe, just 25 mother and baby pairs. They had them come into a lab setting where then the nurses, the researchers, are the ones who put them down for bed. So they weren't in their usual environment. Their mothers or parents were not the ones putting them down, but the researchers that they didn't know were putting them down and sleep training them. And they studied their cortisol levels along with their mother's cortisol levels. Now, the issue with this study, there are several, so bear with me for a second. The main issue, there was no control group. All the children were sleep trained that were there. So there's no control group to compare. They only tested the cortisol for the first 3 days. So after day 3, they stopped testing. Even though they actually had the children through day 5 coming in, they didn't do any measurements. So that is a very, very small amount of data, 3 days worth. That is not helpful to us, and that is definitely not going to be substantial to saying there is long-term harm from sleep training because we have 3 days worth of data. The main thing that they noticed is that after a couple days, the mother's stress level, their cortisol, dropped, and the baby stayed about the same. So they use this as an argument that mothers and babies' cortisol were no longer in sync after sleep training or 3 days into sleep training, and therefore that meant a risk in their attachment that would cause long-term harm. So that is quite a leap to take 3 days of data and to say, oh, because their cortisol levels did not stay in sync, this is harmful for mother and baby. There is no research to support that claim. That is a big one that you will see quoted, you will see misquoted. And so I wanted you to be aware of it because it's really a very small sample size and a very small amount of data. And the conclusions that it makes actually are not helpful to the overall story. It is a very, very minuscule amount of information for the broad claims that this study is trying to make. I know there is so much fear-mongering and mom-shaming out there about sleep training, and I want to encourage you that the research shows otherwise and that there is nothing you need to be afraid of, especially if this is a path that you think is going to help your family. If you're considering sleep training, I want to direct you to this next video that is going to give you some good steps to get started towards sleep training.